I grew up in Mooresville, Louisiana, which is a very small farming community in Avoyelles Parish. I think the census is less than 1,000 people live there. In 5th grade, I met the first black Catholic priest I'd ever seen. He came to Our Lady of Sorrows, which was the Catholic school in Mooresville, Louisiana, that we were all attending. And I was so impressed with him because the bishop was there, and they were you know, putting all these accolades on him. And I said, God, that's all right. I want to be like him. My father was a very hardworking man. He was a sharecropper. Okay, he was a farmer. But one thing he had that most of the others didn't have, he had his own home, because when he came back from World War II, he utilized and took advantage of the opportunity to build and buy his own home. So there was a certain pride and independence with that. As he would say, he can never tell me I got to get out of this house. And I remember that well. And my mother, she went 1 year to Grambling, but she couldn't go back because my grandfather, she was one of 8 children. He just couldn't afford it, and that kind of thing. So she did domestic work, and every now and then they would call her in to substitute teach. I remember vividly being in about the 5th grade, 4th or 5th grade, and the farm, they had fallen behind on the corn harvest, you know, taking in the corn. And the man he was working for came and said, look, Jules, my father's name was Simon Jules Johnson, we need one more person to drive the tractor so we can break more corn, you know. And I think your boy there, he can handle that. Have him come with you. He'll drive the tractor, and you can be on the ground helping loading it up. And I remember my daddy said, this boy? I said, yes. And he said, before he stays out of school one day to work in the field, your corn will rot in the field. And that stayed with me, because he didn't want that mess to start. By mess, I mean too many young men like myself, when they get 15 or 16, they just would drop out of school. That's because they would have missed so much school. They just couldn't compete, and they were just putting in time. And he had that insight, and I definitely owe that to him. Seminary in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, there was a tension that, for instance, if we wanted to go to town, this wasn't, of course, an all-boys school. We wanted to go to town to get a new pair of tennis shoes. We had what's called the buddy system. You know, you had to take someone with you. Because the Klan's influence was still very great there. And I personally was never confronted or anything, but there was an awareness. And the school was good because it was created so they could educate young black males to be priests. So that was the special situation and circumstance. So we had young black men from Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Texas, and of course Louisiana. Then I went to Iowa, Epworth, Iowa, to Divine Word College, which is a college seminary. And that opened my world, because it wasn't an all-black school anymore. It was, we were indeed the minority, you know what I'm saying? And I adjusted, and I was always open to what other people knew, though. Little did I know, only after I matured to some degree, I had very low self-esteem. You know, some of it was coming from what I'd been told as a child. You won't amount to nothing. You won't be nothing. And at the same time, I'd go, I'll show you, you know? And that's why I couldn't wait to come home with that A paper or whatever, or award. And as I was assessing myself through that, he was, and there was another black priest there who taught scripture, you know? I learned a whole lot from him. I'd never met a black guy who had studied at the Gregorian Institute in Rome and had his life censored in scripture, and he knew Hebrew, and you know what I'm saying is, there was so much coming at me at one time. And the one thing, the common denominator of being in a seminary college was the experience was positive. Everybody wanted you to do good. And I think that helped me. That helped me a whole lot. As I was growing there and learning these things about myself, I realized, though, I would not make a good priest, okay? The distractions were too great. I loved the preaching, I loved the teaching, but I didn't like coming back to the rectory alone. In 1972, I decided I did not want to be a priest, and that was very upsetting in my family. But within 2 years after leaving the seminary, 3 years after leaving the seminary, I was married. A friend of mine who was in the seminary with me, Donald Bernard, was graduating from Tulane Law School in 1972. He says, man, why don't you come to law school? I had, you know what I'm saying? And it's that type of fostering that fired up dreams, created challenges, and I moved with it because I said, they're doing good. You know, I can do this. Even though I didn't know much about the legal profession at all. In my associative thinking, if you need a lawyer, something isn't right. You know what I mean? I didn't associate it with the challenge of a profession that's respected and that I can do a lot of good. Went to law school, 74 to 77 at Tulane. And after graduation, I got a job with the district attorney's office in Rapides Parish in Alexandria. When President Ronald Reagan was elected, I had blanketed the Southwest with applications and resumes. I was trying to get into the federal system. And there was an active campaign, as I understand, for young prosecutors with experience, especially in the drug divisions, because I had a friend from Shreveport who went all the way to Miami to prosecute drugs. It was a great stepping stone. Of course, it paid more money, which was also part of the incentive and my interest. But when President Reagan was elected, he froze all federal hiring, so my hope of going to Houston was dashed. My greatest joy and pleasure was helping someone. I'll give you an example. There was a young man who played basketball at a nearby high school in the city. He got a scholarship to a Texas university to play basketball. He came home that first Thanksgiving, you know, drove from North Texas, came home, and he still wanted to be with the boys, you know, and they asked him to drop a package off. Okay, yes. You know what happened. He was arrested. Oh, his mother was devastated. His mother was and he was just part of the pile on the desk, the pile of files on the desk. And she came in. This was this black lady. She reminded me so much of my mother. And she was just devastated. I said, ma'am, is this his first time? Oh my God, yes, he's working, he has a scholarship. If he doesn't keep this scholarship, he can't go to school. And I don't want him back on the streets. And that's the only place he can go. So I told her, I said, have him come and see me and you come with him. And they came up and I met him and immediately I knew he was a fine young man. And I dismissed the charge. One of the things I liked about the DA's office in Rapides Parish, you handled the case from punt to final score, you know? And yes, it was a case there. Yes, he was delivering some, but no, it wouldn't profit anything to prosecute this young man. I see beyond that, and hell, I was 18, 19 years old once too. And so I dismissed it. Years passed. I was in the barber shop in Alexandria, and the barber, Mr. Emmett Matwire, I like to name them, you know, and he had cut my hair. My son, he said, Judge, tell me something. You know how the talking in the barber shop about this, and this young man had just sat down. He was in a shirt, tie, very well dressed. He said, did he call you Judge Johnson? I said, yes. He said, sir, what's your first name? I said, Donald Johnson. He jumped up. At first, you know, and he hugged me and said, man, you don't remember me, but let me tell you. He graduated, he was a CPA already, and he had come down to visit his mother. And he said, you give me the biggest break. He said, I knew I wasn't going to play pro ball. He said, I was good enough to be on a college team, but he said, I wasn't a pro caliber. So he said, I stuck with accounting, finance, and he said, I want you to know I appreciate this. That's the kind of satisfaction I'm describing, because through the course of my life, I got some breaks too. All right. right, I decided to run for judge, never DA, because my heart was never in prosecution, in being district attorney. I didn't want any part of that. In fact, I never even sought to be first assistant. And the idea of running for judge was first put in my mind in 1984, ironically by a judge who was on the bench at that time, Judge M.L. Laird, okay? And he says, why don't you run for judge? At least city court judge, test the waters. And I had no political ambitions whatsoever. I said, why did you figure that? He said, I think you have enough crossover appeal to get elected. He said, you've been here now for a few years, and don't worry, we've tested the waters, we see the flavor. But that was literally in a bar room we were talking, but he was serious, but I just pushed it aside. But it came to fruition on the district court level. First, there was a case involving an elderly victim, Lady Rabelais. Okay, she was murdered as part of a gang initiation. Out of that case, I had 7. At that time, the cases were allotted to a division, so I got all 7 of them. But 2 I sentenced to death. That was the most difficult time of my judgeship. That's because being Catholic and the way I was raised, etc., it tore at something deep inside of me. And I found it very difficult. In fact, the Supreme Court called and said, you know, I was talking to someone there and they said, well, the jury did that, the jury, but I had to sign. So I called Father Thompson. You know, he was my spiritual advisor. He had been my pastor. I said, Father Thompson, I'm really having trouble with this. I said, I have a conflict of interest. I know the oath I took but I said, no one here has even tried a death penalty case, let alone having to sentence someone to die. And he says, do your duty, young man, if you know him. And so I started to reconcile the conscience thing with that, and I had to do it again. The next case I had was State versus Amanda Gutweiler. State versus Amanda Gutweiler was very interesting because it was intellectually challenging, and she was a lady that was accused of burning her 3 children to death. And I threw out the grand jury indictment because of evidentiary procedures that were not good. In other words, sharing evidence and testimony between the parties without the defendant knowing about it. And I threw it out. Of course, it was a big uproar. How can you do this? I had a guy come up to me in the grocery store and said, what is your problem? I said, well, if you know something I don't, please tell me. I said, I go to sleep at night, you know, and this was legally wrong. Yes, it's tragic, 3 children died, but did she intend what happened? It was a very difficult case. There was a lot of criticism. They criticized my law clerk, different conflicts of interest that were just tearing at me, you know. My judicial philosophy was justice at all costs. Even if it wrenched me inside and I knew that this was not emotionally the correct decision, intellectually, and based upon the laws that's in this book, it is fair. And if it's fair, it's just. By retiring from the bench, I didn't mean I wasn't going to work. I want to do something else. In fact, I'm anxiously looking to get into something else. I've worked since I was 15. And since I'm in relatively good health, I plan to do something positive. I would like to be remembered as a symbol of hope, encouraging others, especially young black males, as to their own self-esteem, how they perceive themselves, and that they must dream, and that the opportunities are there. The opportunities are there, and like my dad used to say, hard work ain't kill nobody, or I would have been dead, you know. So with that principle, go at it. Nobody's going to give you anything. I firmly believe that. He blesses us, but we got to do something with it. And I firmly believe that.